false eyes. The eye that comes to a spiritual get-together and says, you know, I'm going to make all these resolutions, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that, I'm going to do that, and then you leave here and some clown cuts you off in traffic, and you go from the Buddha to Charles Manson, like that. And all these things are false eyes. There's no unity in the psyche. And yet we continually hold on to these things. We're married successively to these husbands. And the thing that we're holding on to right this minute is not even permanent. It's not our husband either. So, to quote one of my favorite philosophers, what is to be done? We have to start working on the psyche. There's two ways that we do this. One is that we're going to start disempowering these little false eyes. The other is that we're going to start building this connection so that we can ask the nous to give us this water to drink so that we'll never thirst again. And this is the crux of the Hesychasm practice. What does it mean in practice? The first part of the practice that we're going to talk about is not the Jesus prayer. It's what I call nepsis, which just means watchfulness or watching. Anytime you see watching in the New Testament, in the parables, we're talking about this practice. Anytime you talk about the household being left and the servants are running the place, we're talking about this practice of watchfulness. And what does watchfulness mean? It doesn't mean beating yourself up. It means just being aware of the eyes. We do this in two ways. One way that we do it is we just take time off and we sit. We watch. We watch the mind. And we don't pass judgment. We're not here to build the strength of the id or superego or whatever the term is. We're not here to beat up on ourselves. We're here to just watch. Watch the way the mind works. I had a funny experience this morning. I got to sit with Ken for a little bit. And just for a few minutes, 15 minutes before morning prayer. And I'm sitting there and I start to think, I really don't have time to be sitting here being quiet, doing nothing. I got to go work on my talk on the Hesychasm tradition and inner silence. Which is why, and the reason I'm sharing that, is that the best attitude to take when we're watching ourselves is just sort of a gentle sense of humor. Saint Theophan the Reckless, who was a bishop in the end of the 19th century, who basically left his episcopate to become a hermit and wrote on the Hesychasm tradition, advised giving yourself a silly little nickname. So as you're watching yourself, you almost third person it, because you're talking to this, which is not the you. You're talking to the site. So Theophan says he gave himself a silly name. Now, being a bishop and a serious Hesychasm guy, he didn't share what his silly little name was. Saint Seraphim of Sarov, roughly, who lived in the early part of the century, used to call himself Poor Seraphim. I don't know that St. Francis was connected anyway to this tradition, but he used to refer to himself as Brother Ass, or at least to his body as Brother Ass. Bishop Jean of the French Orthodox Church used to call himself Monsignor in a very silly, pompous way. Just be gentle with yourself and sit and watch. That's the first step. Just sit and watch. No judgment. No condemnation. Not trying to change your behavior. thing we have power to do at this point is to attend, is to listen. That's why I love the Oriental Rite liturgy, several points where they say, wisdom, attend, pay attention. It's the one thing we can do, is be attentive. The other way that we practice this throughout the day, and this is crucial, is to find a way to remind you to remember. I used to have a very tiny prayer book that I carry in my pocket. Whenever my hand went to it, where am I? What am I doing? Where's my body? And it's amazing because you're walking down the street and you notice all of a sudden, wow, I'm tense. My face is all, or I'm angry. Or I'm daydreaming. My mind's way off into something that happened yesterday, reliving an argument with a coworker. Where you always come up with, oh, I could have said this and that really would, worrying about tomorrow. And your mind's all, and just remember, and again, no judgment. Just look at yourself, give your little pet name, and sort of an amused, compassionate watchfulness. The other thing that you can do is pick something that you do during the day. Like every time I walk through a door, I'm just going to check myself. Feel your body. Where are you tensing? You're tensing your jaw, you're tensing your shoulders. There's all these thoughts. Again, you're not trying to change anything. You're just being aware. But what you will find is that over a period of time, when you sneak up on these eyes, it's like leaving a bunch of kids in a room, and the adult supervision walks away, and they go wild, and they're, using magic markers on the wall, knocking over the furniture, and then an adult steps in, doesn't have to say anything, and they stop.
Your High Bishop.
Right? I wasn't doing anything. It wasn't me. So when we watch these eyes, these little false things that happen, and watch them, what happens is they stop. Sometimes more, sometimes less. This is why Gurdjieff, who really reinterpreted this tradition for a secular audience, called this the way of the slime man. Sneaking up on the noose. We're not trying to stop the monkey mind. We're not trying to corral all these guys and line them up into rows. We're just going to sneak in, stick our head in the room, and they see us and stop. And we'll start to find out that this observation itself creates a place, a state. Theophan the Recluse called it magnetizing. Gurdjieff called it the magnetic center. St. Paul the Apostle called it the inner man. When he says, I pray for you to be strengthened in your inner man. I never knew what that meant. I always sort of pictured like a little mini-me somewhere, But this inner man that he wants you to be strengthened is this place of watchfulness. And it's a state, it's a place, it's a condition, it's a spiritual organ. And the mere act of the observation creates this. And the mere act of observation, it has an alchemical effect, because in addition to stopping these eyes, slowing them down, saying, settle down, kids, some of the energy that went